Hi there, this is Ty with the Canix product team. In this video, we're going to be going over how to set up a bill of materials in Canix. So you'll find bill of materials under Inventory, Non-Cannabis Bill of Materials. That'll bring up this table here, a list of all of your current bill of materials. In this case, I've got this Blue Dream jar recipe that's already partially filled in, and we're going to go ahead and finish this up. So first thing, starting from the top left here, you'll see that we have the option to select our associated output item. If you want to set up a single bill of materials and you want to use that bill of materials for different strains, so maybe you're making 1/8 premium jars across a dozen different strains, you would just use this drop down and search for some of those other items and select as many as you want. When you select these, it means that you can go ahead and use this bill of materials when you're creating these items in your manufacturing runs and manufacturing batches. And one of the big advantages of getting these bill of materials set up is it's going to save you a lot of time on those manufacturing runs, because all of this information about the raw materials and output items is going to pre-populate. So just a huge, huge time saver there. Next aspect of this is our estimated output quantity. So for a single unit of this Blue Dream 1/8, what is the expected output? 3.5 grams in this case. We also have active and expiration dates available. So the active date is required. Expiration date is up to you. If you've just got, your one bill of materials, you can just leave that expiration date blank for this item. But if you're moving from an initial version of this bill of materials and updating it, say you're swapping out your jar and lid combination for something that maybe fits your brand a little bit better, you could set an expiration date maybe for the end of the quarter, and then duplicate this bill of materials with the actions drop down in the top right, and swap out that jar, swap out that lid, and set that new bill of materials to become active on October 1st. And what that'll do is it'll make sure your old bill of materials isn't used by anyone on your team. This expiration date will prevent it from being used, and it just makes sure everyone's on the same page, reading from the same BOM. So next up, we have our non-cannabis inventory. Maybe the most immediately noticeable thing is this proportional versus fixed feature here. So proportional means for a jar, a lid, a label, those kind of items where if you're making 30 1/8 jars, you're going to need 30 jars, 30 lids, 30 labels. You might also have various bill of materials where you have an item that doesn't necessarily scale with the output quantity. So an example in this scenario might be gloves. So you've got 5 people working on this. You need 5 pairs of gloves. It doesn't really matter if they're working on a batch that takes an hour or 2 hours. They're going to use the same amount of gloves. So we can tag that as fixed. Of course, you can set your quantities on all of these and your units as well. So if you're using, sugar or pectin, something like that, you'd be able to set your quantity in grams, pounds, whatever you prefer. One other thing to note is that you can actually add these non-cannabis items more than once. So if you have an ingredient that needs to be used at multiple different steps in the process, you can kind of keep those quantities separate on your bill of materials. I'm going to remove those for now since we already got our gloves in place. And next step is adding what source cannabis inventory is allowed to be used for this bill of materials. So there's a few ways you can do this. You can restrict the source material by selecting a specific item. So maybe, we want to restrict this to a specific type of Blue Dream buds. So we could select that and the quantity allowed. And then this would be the only type of item, or the only item that can be used to create the associated output items. Another approach you could take, maybe a little more practical in this case, is by subtype. So we could grab our A buds, since this is a 1/8 premium jar. and say that this is the only subtype item that's allowed to be used in this bill of materials. And then same for item type as well. That just gives you some control over what source cannabis can be added to your manufacturing runs. I think in this case, using the subtype and ABUDs makes the most sense, especially if you're doing this across different strains. You wouldn't necessarily want to create a restriction by a specific item, right? So we'll just leave that as ABUDs for now. And this bill of materials is ready to go to be used in manufacturing runs and batches, and hopefully save you a lot of time and make sure that all of your inputs and outputs are being set up properly. Thanks for watching.